In Spongebob Battle for Bikini Bottom, there are a total of 100 golden spatulas, the golden spatulas being this game's equivalent to the stars from Mario 64. Despite how great this game is overall, not all spatulas were created equally. Some are extremely fun to collect, and some outright suck, but which ones rock and which ones stink? I'll be ranking every single golden spatula in Battle for Bikini Bottom from worst to best. Of course, this list is simply based off my personal opinion. If you agree or disagree on any of my placements in this video, feel free to leave a comment down below. A couple things to note before starting this ranking. First, this list is based off the original version of Battle for Bikini Bottom, not rehydrated. Second, I will be excluding the Patrick Sock spatulas, as those would be a little weird to rank in this list. Just like with the spatulas, some socks are fun and some below. I wouldn't know how to rank each one of those. Perhaps at another point I'll rank the socks in this game. That means this ranking will only have 92 spatulas included. Now, as to not waste any more of your time, on to the ranking. Number 92 to number 85, Mr. Krabs Golden Spatulas. By far the worst set of golden spatulas in the game, that is getting a certain number of shiny objects and paying Mr. Krabs. All of these suck. After each spatula, the amount needed gets higher. Even the first spatula requires 3,000 shiny objects, which you really won't have often on your initial playthrough, as you're constantly spending points on doors and clams. This is one you'll be doing after beating the main game, as none of these spatulas are required to beat the game. At that point, you'll just be grinding. Anyone who knows anything about this game knows grinding for shiny objects is not fun. Not only does the grinding for these spatulas suck, but the amount needed is absolutely insane. For 100% completion of the original Battle for Bikini Bottom, you'll need a total of 108,000 shiny objects. You'll be lucky to even have 5,000 shiny objects after beating the game, so get used to destroying tikis. There are spots where you'll be able to get this amount in around 20 minutes or so, but it's just mindless grinding. Rehydrated greatly improved this part of the game by making the total amounts much lower. These spatulas are by far the worst in the game. Number 84, SpongeBob's Closet. I know it's the first one in the game, but I can't put the spatula any higher considering how easy it is. All you need for this one is 50 shiny objects, all of which you can find walking around SpongeBob's kitchen and bathroom. The time it takes for me to explain the spatula is longer than how long it takes to get it. I don't want to bash it too much since it is the tutorial spatula, but because of how easy it is, it has to be at the bottom. Number 83, complete the Rollin' Ball Room. When I play Rehydrated, I never struggled with this puzzle, but here, the physics of the ball really makes the section of the game extremely frustrating. I do like how unique it is, and I don't mind the majority of the section until the last part where you have to bounce the ball into the spring. It's just so finicky, and there are times where I'm standing on one side, yet the ball won't roll to that side, and it will fall off. If this part was earlier in the puzzle, then it wouldn't be a big deal, but it's at the very end after you do everything else. So if you fail, it's almost a whole minute of setup just to get screwed over by the bad physics at the end. That's why the spatula is ranked lower than other ones I might find more frustrating or harder. If you fail on some other spatulas that are much harder, you don't really lose that much time, and you're able to start over almost immediately. Here, most of the puzzle is pretty easy, but having to start over and do the easy parts of the puzzle over and over again while waiting for the ball gets old after the second attempt or so. Even if that last part wasn't so annoying, this section still wouldn't be that fun with all the standing around. Number 82, Frosty Bungee. You'll soon see that my least favorite types of spatulas in this game are the bungee ones because of how little variety there is in them. You simply go to a hook, press A, and that's about it. I don't hate the bungees, I just find most of them to be too simple. On top of that, some of them are behind clams, so you're basically paying for a spatula. It's a Mr. Krabs spatula with extra steps. The worst of these spatulas would be the one from Sand Mountain, as not only is it 2,300 shiny objects, but there's nothing here. At least other ones might have some tikis or something cool to look at. This one is just a spatula and some shiny objects. You can't get any more simple than this. Number 81, Tower Bungee. Another bungee with nothing going on. The only thing that puts this one above the other one is that you don't need as many shiny objects in Goo Lagoon like you do in Sand Mountain, but this one is still a bungee spatula. Number 80, Shipwreck Bungee. Another bungee spatula. This one is more than the Sand Mountain one, but not by much. The only real advantage this one has over the other ones before it is that it has tikis, and it is cool to look at while bungeeing down. It might look cool, but it still is a bungee spatula, so it's going to end up at the bottom. Number 79, Through the Woods. Despite being one of the final levels in the game, Kelp Forest probably has one of the easiest spatulas, that being the one you get at the end of the Kelp Forest entrance. This section is fun when finding the campers, but simply walking to the end, all you need to do is beat like 3 small robots, and that's pretty much it. There is literally nothing here, and for the most part, this is probably the most free spatula in the game, and for this point in the game, it's pretty weird there is a spatula this effortless. Number 78, top of the entrance area, the Murmur. Similar to Kelp Forest, this section of the Murmur is incredibly easy and short, though there is a little more going on here. First, there are actually some more big enemies that you have to beat, and some gameplay, other than just walking forward. It really isn't that bad, but it's so short as it is only a couple of enemies and bubble bowls until you get to the end of the section. At least the first section of the Kelp Forest had the campers. Here, I'm not really sure why this part of the Murmur couldn't have been combined with the second, since both sections are pretty short. Number 77, Cowabungie. Another bungee spatula. It still is a boring spatula, but this one has the big plus of being completely free. That helps make it much better than the other 3 bungee spatulas before it. Plus, this is an introduction to the bungee mechanic, so I can't be too critical here. Despite that, it's still a bungee spatula with no other objectives, so it will be towards the bottom. Number 76, Infestation at the Krusty Krab. Right behind the bungee hooks for spatulas I do not care for are the combat sections of this game. For all the great things about this game, the combat is not one of them. It's fine, but that's about it. It's just okay. The parts where you have to fight a bunch of enemies are either boring or super annoying. The Krusty Krab one is probably the worst of all the combat sections, just in the fact that it is a combination of different frustrating factors. First, the close quarters makes it so you're always being attacked by something. It also has some of the more annoying enemies in the games, that being the laser robots, the sleepy time robots, and the chucks. The combination of these robots in the small area means you're going to get hit a lot. It's just a lot coming at you at once in such a small space. I really don't think you'll be able to beat this section if you have less than 5 underwear. Because of that, it is easily the worst battle section in the game. Number 75, Robot Patrick. For the first boss fight in the game on this list, this is the only boss in the game that I really do not like at all. My main issue with it that other bosses don't suffer from to the same degree is just how long the attack patterns are before you have the opportunity to attack the boss. It isn't a hard boss fight, but it is annoying having to wait for Patrick to finish all of his moves in order to finally hit him. If you get hit, then it restarts his attack sequence and you have to wait from the start. This is true for other bosses as well, but the issue, like I mentioned, is that you have to wait for such a long time until you have the opening to attack. Plus, on the final phase, you need to hit Patrick with the bubble bowl. It does allow you some time to do this, but there were times I was hitting Patrick and the game didn't register it as a hit, so he began attacking again and I had to wait all over again. Though, one compliment I will give this boss fight is that Robot Patrick's design is my favorite out of all the robot versions of the characters. Number 74, Goo Tanker Ahoy. This is probably the most cryptic spatula in the game, as there is no real clue on what you're supposed to do. You aren't sure if you need to press a button or beat any enemies. Turns out, you need to hit the lid of the container that the goo is coming from with the cruise bubble. No kid would know how to do this on their first playthrough. That's not it for the spatula though. After you lower the goo in the lake, you have to find the spatula itself, which is in this out-of-the-way spot behind the tanker, which, again, you wouldn't think to look unless you knew it was there otherwise. At least this one is fixed in the rehydrated version of the game. Number 73, Power Crystal Crisis, and number 72, Through the Kelp Caves. I'll put these two together since they suffer from the same issues. The Power Crystal one is just a little worse since you need to do some extra work in this area. The Kelp Caves is probably one of the worst designed sections in the game, which sucks because it has some of the best use of character synergy. Using Patrick's throw to open up buttons that Spongebob needs to cruise bubble. It's one of the only places in the game where this kind of synergy occurs, yet this section suffers severely from there only being one boss stop in the whole area, so having to backtrack over and over to switch characters gets old fast. Not only will you be backtracking to switch characters, but also to grab stone tikis. A great idea for a section that was just poorly executed. Number 71, Following the Bouncing Ball. This is a little side challenge you'll be doing at the very end of SpongeBob's Dream. It is a cool idea of a challenge as you need to direct a ball down these narrow platforms to get to the edge so you can use the ball as a platform to reach the spatula. It's a neat little challenge that take some trial and error to complete. The only major downside to this one is that if you fail at grabbing the spatula, then you have to platform all the way back up to try the spatula again, and teleporting to the spatula doesn't send you to where the button to start the challenge is, but to the start of the level. So if you fall off near the end, you'll have to platform all the way back again. Again, a pretty cool and unique idea for a spatula, just poorly executed. Number 70, get a loft there, matey. This is another cryptic spatula in the game. I don't hate these spatulas, especially with how generous this game is for spatula requirements. I don't love them either. With these spatulas, I also prefer them to have a little bit of challenge to them as well. This cryptic spatula doesn't have anything going on really. All you need to do is find the trampoline at the rear of the ship, and it bounces you straight to the spatula. At least some of the other spatulas that are sort of like this one have something more going on, other than bouncing on one trampoline. Number 69, Swing Along Spatula. This is another pretty cryptic spatula, though not as bad as Goo Tanker Ahoy. In order to access the spatula, you'll need to find a button that is tucked away behind this rock. A rock you wouldn't think to ever check without a guide. The button then spawns a Texas symbol you can use to get the spatula. At least getting to the spatula once you press the button is somewhat fun. Number 68, how in tarnation do I get there? I'll be honest, I really don't know how to rank this one since I don't think I used the intended path to get the spatula. I just got to a platform that was high enough and hovered over to the spatula. Similar to Swing Along Sandy, you'll have to go down this random location and hit a button that will set up a Texas swing for you to get the spatula. It is strange that there are two challenges that are pretty simple and identical in the same level. This one is just above the other one in Rock Bottom because there are ways to cheese the spatula. Number 67, on top of the chum bucket. This is definitely one of the simpler spatulas in the game. All you need to do is hit the 3 buttons with your cruise bubble, and you have a free trampoline up to the top of the chum bucket. It's very easy, it's simple, but it introduces how to use the cruise bubble. Pretty much a tutorial with nothing else going on. Number 66, the funnel machines. I said it before my previous video, but my least favorite character in the game is Patrick, just because of his ability slowing down your mobility so much. This spatula is the worst when it comes to his mobility issues, as you need to make it across platforms that tilt, tiles that damage you, and avoiding projectiles, all while not being able to jump and being slower. Plus, getting hit once destroys the watermelon, and you're on a strict time limit since the watermelon expires so quickly. Plus again, there are times where even if you make it to the end and throw the watermelon at the button, it won't register it, and you'll need to start all over again. Luckily, these parts don't need to be completed all at once. This one really isn't that bad, it's pretty short, it's just a little annoying at times. Number 65, wall jump in the chum bucket. This is another easy spatula that's just sitting out in the open in the chum bucket. I never had trouble with the spatula, but I could see why people might, as it is all the way up in a spot you wouldn't ever see unless you searched for it, and you have to wall jump to get the spatula. Usually when wall jumping, there is a clear indicator of where Spongebob can wall jump, but here there isn't, so I can understand if this one is a little bit annoying to find for some people. Even for those who don't think it's hard to find, it's kind of just sitting there out in the open, really easy to get. Number 64, the Spinning Towers of Power. This is another one I don't know how to rank, as it is such a unique spatula in the game, and one where your enjoyment of it heavily depends on if you're good at solving these kinds of puzzles. I am not, so I struggled with this one, and usually I look up a guide to it when I do it. I don't really hate this spatula on the fact that I can't do it well, but I'm simply putting it this low because I don't think a little kid would be able to figure this one out on their own. With other difficult spatulas, I think most kids would eventually win at it. This is one I think every kid would either just do random stuff with until they succeed or would just give up. A cool idea for a spatula, but not one I could ever do, admittedly. Number 63, on top of the pineapple. Again, like many of the beginning spatulas, there's nothing wrong with this one. It's just really easy. There's a lot more to this one than the chum bucket one, as you need to hit 2 buttons and time it, but it really isn't all that hard. It's a neat little challenge to give you your second spatula, but it's just some simple timing and platforming. Number 62, come back with the cruise bubble. This is another one that I can see people having trouble with just because of how cryptic of a spatula it is. The only clue is pretty much an instruction that you can't do it until much later in the game. This is cool as this is the only spatula in the game that is like this, where you have to come back after you unlock another ability. So I do like that about it. However, the button you have to shoot is not in view of where you stand to shoot it, so it can be a bit confusing on what you're supposed to do. You actually have to find the button from the back and then walk to the spot where you can shoot it from. I do think it is a neat little challenge in downtown Bikini Bottom, but it could have been a little clearer on where you're supposed to shoot. Number 61, ambush at the tree dome. Like I said previously, I'm not a fan of the combat parts in this game, as the sections are either frustrating or too boring. The tree dome section is on the boring end, as it contains some easier enemies and really has nothing unique about it other than where it takes place. There is a timer, but like, who needs almost 3 minutes to beat like 6 robots? One thing I do like about this part though is how SpongeBob looks in the tree dome. Kind of makes me wish that there was more to do in the tree dome, so I could see SpongeBob look like this more often. Number 60, ambush at the lighthouse. Another boring combat section that is very easy, but it is a bit more excusable as it is much earlier on. Not much more I could say about this part. It's a simple enemy horde section. Number 59, Mr. Krabs' Dream. So I know a lot of people hate the spatula and consider it one of the worst in the game. I agree with people that this part can be annoying with all that's going on, and it still is a combat section which I normally don't care for. However, I do think this is one of the better combat sections of all the ones I mentioned so far. First, it isn't as annoying as the Krusty Krab one, but it isn't as extremely easy as the others. It is annoying, sure, but I never found this section to be so hard that it took me more than a few tries to beat it. It does make sense that this section is harder as it is the last combat section in the game. If you position yourself right, you can easily take out the smaller robots, Bubble Bowl the robots with the shields, and then take out the rest. None of the robots here are ones that are too difficult to fight either. I also do like the uniqueness of having to defeat a certain number of enemies before destroying the duplicators. It makes this level stand out a little more. I still don't love this part, I just don't find it as annoying or difficult as what others think. Number 58, slip and slide under the pier. The ones where you have to freeze the water are very simple, but there's nothing really all that bad about them either. They aren't as easily accessible as the bungee ones, and they are free, but they are still too simple to put much higher. I feel like they could have done more with these spatulas, but as is, there's nothing wrong with them, but there's nothing that makes them stand out. Number 57, down in the swamp. Another one of those walking on frozen water spatulas. This one has the spatula in a cage that you have to press a button to open, so this one is on a timer, but the water being frozen is also timed, so the extra timer seems a little redundant. Again, this is just another spatula I really don't have much to say about. Number 56, Patrick's Dilemma, the final combat section spatula I'll mention in this ranking. This one is easy like some of the others, but it is the first one in the game, so I can't bash it too much. Again, not much I can add here. Number 55, slip sliding away. There's nothing particularly wrong with this slide, but there's nothing that stands out about it either. This is probably the easiest spatula slide in the game, and it isn't that hard to not fall off, so you'll likely get this one on your first try. Number 54, Robot Sandy. Like I said, the boss fights aren't a high point in the game for me, but other than Robot Patrick, there are none that I dislike. I just find most of them boring or a little annoying. Robot Sandy is on the boring side of things. Again, super easy and there's a lot of waiting around, but not as much waiting as the Patrick fight. It's a fine first fight in the game for the most part. Number 53, defeat King Jellyfish. Another easy boss fight. It's the first in the game, so I can't be too harsh on it, but I do like this one more than the other bosses I've mentioned because there isn't as much waiting around for an opening. You can take down the King Jellyfish pretty quickly if you're good enough. Number 52, Save the Children. The first spatula you can get in Goo Lagoon. All you need to do is bubble bash the balloons to save the children floating up in the air. You'll have to time your bubble bash, but for the most part, the spatula isn't too bad. The two kids floating over the water are a little more annoying to get because the platforms sink as you stand on them, so it's a little more tricky to get in the proper position to hit the balloons. Still, nothing too bad. Number 51, Here You Go. I know a lot of people are going to wonder why the spatula from Patrick's Dream isn't near the bottom since it's technically a free spatula. There's no challenge, unlike all the other dreams. You simply talk to Patrick and you get your reward. I know I complain about some other spatulas being freebies, but I'm okay with this one. I don't hate it. Two reasons. First, this isn't as much of a freebie as, let's say, the first section of the Kelp Forest, because Patrick's Dream is all the way at the end of the level after all the platforming needed to get there. Second, I think it's funny and it fits Patrick's character as a whole. It's also similar to how Patrick's Dream was in the show, with there not being much at all. Though the downsides are that the spatula is a bit redundant since you get another spatula right near Patrick's Dream, that one for completing the level, and that the developers had to scrap a whole level for this. There was supposed to be a whole level here, but they ended up going with literally nothing. It is funny, sure, but I can't put it up much higher just because of how little there is here, because it's literally nothing. Number 50, on top of shady shoals. Another quick and simple spatula in Bikini Bottom. This one is the tutorial to the bubble bowl, but at least there is a little platform tied to it, unlike the cruise bubble spatula. It isn't too hard, but it might take a kid a few tries to get the spatula. Number 49, top of the lodge. This is a pretty simple Sandy swinging challenge, and is the only spatula in Sand Mountain that Sandy is required for. It is a fun extra thing and requires a little more effort to get super short, but it gives you something to do in Sand Mountain outside of the slides. Number 48, defeat the Flying Dutchman, the final in-level boss in the game. For the second to last boss in the game, this one is super easy. I actually had more trouble with Prawn than I did with the Flying Dutchman. The fight is pretty fun as the attacks do come out quickly, even if there is only one attack for the most part. Pretty easy, but nowhere near the worst boss in the game. Number 47, shut down the security system. One of the final spatulas you'll get in the Murmur layer. It's the one that is required for you to do before fighting the boss. It's sort of like one of those spatulas where you have to collect a certain number of something, like finding the steering wheels, but you have to push 4 buttons, 3 of which you can only hit with the bubble bowl. Unlike those other ones though, this one starts pretty late in the level, and all the buttons are in pretty obvious spots. Like the first one is right next to the computer, the other is at the end of the security tunnel, and the last one being in the ball rolling section. There's also another button you have to hit with Patrick near the tower puzzle. This definitely seems like an afterthought spatula to give this short level 8 spatulas. There's nothing all that wrong with this one. It isn't annoying, it just comes a little late, and the buttons are a little too simple to get, to which makes this one of the more forgettable spatulas in the game. Number 46, Super Bounce. This is a fun little challenge in Spongebob's Dream where you have to bounce up to Squidward's house, but spiked blocks will move and block the trampolines. It all comes down to time and your jumps. It's only a few trampolines and a well-timed jump until you get the golden spatula on top of Squidward's house. It's definitely the easiest spatula in Spongebob's Dream, but again, there's nothing really that bad about this, just nothing that makes it stand out that much. Number 45, get to the museum. This is the first section of Rock Bottom. I mentioned it in my original video that Rock Bottom is my least favorite level in the game. 2 reasons I gave were the ball rolling parts and the Sleepy Time robots, both of whom are present in this first section. There aren't many ball rolling parts in Rock Bottom, but the ones that are here are on top of these thin platforms that are easy to fall off. With how Ball Spongebob controls, it's easy to fall off, and you'll have to walk all the way back to the start. As for the Sleepy Time robots, they just break the pace of the gameplay and slow things down, since you need to sneak to beat them, especially at this point in the game. The Sleepy Time robots are only annoying at this point in the game, as in other levels you have better ways to take care of them, such as using the cruise bubble, but here you have to sneak and slow things down, though the parts of Sandy in this section are pretty fun. Number 44, over the moat. This is a pretty easy spatula, but timing the jumps with the trampolines and trying to avoid the fire-breathing dragons can be a little tricky at times. There isn't that much else I have to say about this one. It's fun, and that's the most important thing when it comes to a spatula being good. Number 43, top of the security tunnel. Just like most of the Murmur layer, this section of the level is a lot of fun with unique floor obstacles and the tricky enemy placements, but this section is super short. There is a little more challenge to it, which is why I put this one higher than the first section, but you can get through the whole area in like 5 minutes. Number 42, Spelunkin'. Turns out there actually isn't a required spatula inside the Jellyfish Fields cave. The one you get in the section is an optional one. I guess I'll consider the cave as a whole for the spatula. This section of the game is pretty much a tutorial for Patrick. I know the section isn't that long either, but it feels like it takes a while. Plus there are tutorials for different things you can use Patrick's ability for, such as stacking watermelons to reach a higher platform, but that use of his ability is only used in the tutorial. A bit weird to have a tutorial for something that is never used again. The spatula itself, though, is a good way to introduce using Patrick's ground pound to stun enemies, though I could see kids having some trouble figuring this one out. Number 41, a path through the goo. This is a ball rolling challenge, and a pretty fun one at that. I do like this challenge as a whole. The only problem with it has nothing to do with the spatula itself, but how you can access the spatula, that is closing the lid on the goo tanker. As you saw, the goo tanker ahoy spatula was at the bottom of the list, and easily one of my least favorite spatulas in the game. As goo tanker ahoy is a requirement to unlock the spatula, they'll knock this one down a few spots, but it still is a fun side challenge in the first section of the Flying Dutchman's graveyard. Number 40, Extreme Bungee. You might be thinking that I'm a hypocrite for putting the spatula so high. Here's the thing, I don't hate the bungee hook spatulas from a mechanic standpoint. What I dislike is that almost all of them are simply bind spatulas, and that you press A once to get the spatula. With the bungee spatulas and the sea needle, there is an objective other than simply pressing A once, that is to destroy the tikis. It isn't much, but it is something to make the spatula more fun. The only downside with the spatula is that if you die or fall, then the tikis respawn, so I recommend you open all the doors and destroy all the robots before doing the spatula. Just one small objective is enough to make me like a bungee hook spatula. Number 39. Across the Trench of Darkness. This spatula is a little hard to rank as you have to complete another spatula to actually get to this one at the end of the level. The third section is pretty fun for the most part with the slide at the start of the level, but most of the section is completing a different spatula. The only downside with completing this area is that most of the section requires Sandy to complete. However, at the very end, there's a couple of sleep time robots, enemies who are extremely difficult for Sandy to fight as she can't sneak. That means you'll likely will run into these enemies as her to get to the end, only to have to go all the way to the back and switch to Spongebob. Again, this isn't really the main spatula for this part of the level, so I really wasn't sure where to place this one. It's alright, but not super memorable either. Number 38. Lasers are fun and good for you. Similar to Spelunkin, this isn't technically the spatula for the area, but since you need to get to the end of the area, I would consider it so. Also, you do have to do the spatula to get to the final slide. This spatula itself is fine. There's something that really stands out about it. You simply need to go to 3 different platforms and defeat the enemies and shut off the lasers. There's something wrong here. It is fun, but there's nothing that makes it stand out. It's just a standard fun spatula, just like many at this point in the list. Number 37, top of the computer area. This is the spatula you get for completing the second area of the Murmur layer. It is short, but there is more going on here than the first and last areas of the Murmur layer. You'll be spending the majority of the section doing Patrick's spatulas at the start, but the parts of SpongeBob are fun. It's, again, just a little short, which pretty much describes this whole level. Number 36, Tiki Roundup. I know a lot of people aren't a huge fan of this section, which I do get. Gathering the stone tikis can take some time, and it's pretty easy to fall off or misjudge bounces when bouncing on the leaves. I do somewhat enjoy this section because it does have a cool and unique use of Patrick's abilities, such as having to maneuver around on the bouncing leaves and set up those leaves for him to be able to move around with the stone tikis. It is slow, but it is a better use of his abilities compared to the kelp caves. The only major downside with the section just has to do with how loud the waterfall noises are here. Number 35, Slide, Leap. This is another small challenge at the end of Jellyfish Fields. It is a little hard to rank this one as well since doing the slide doesn't get you the spatula, but you have to jump onto this one platform at the end of the level to get the spatula. The slide itself is fun enough to where I don't mind restarting the slide to get the spatula, but I never failed at this one on my first try if I knew I had to go for it. Again, a fun little bonus challenge at the end of the level that shouldn't take you more than a couple tries. Number 34, Swingin' Sandy. Here's a bonus challenge in the rooftop area of downtown Bikini Bottom. It's the first real challenge using Sandy's grapple for more than a couple jumps. But none of the Texas logos move. You're pretty much swinging in a straight line for most of the challenge with a couple slight turns here and there. It's a fun spatula, especially for this point in the game. Number 33, Drain the Lake. Another of the optional challenges in Jellyfish Fields. This is definitely one of the better challenges in Battle for Bikini Bottom. It isn't so quick that you forget about it right after, it isn't so easy that it requires no effort, and it isn't frustrating to complete like some other optional spatulas. It's a good use of Patrick's ability, and trying to time the slam in a way where you get every single enemy at once, rather than having to avoid the enemies while holding one as Patrick. It is certainly one of the better spatulas that uses his ability. Number 32, Stop the Plundering Robots. I'm surprised I'm putting the museum section at this spot on the list. I talked about how much I liked that section in my other Battle for Bikini Bottom video, and I always remembered liking it a lot as a kid. When I was planning this list, I was expecting the spatula to be in the top 20 or so, since I do like most of the section, but then replaying the game, I was surprised to learn that you actually get the spatula halfway through this section. You still need to get through the museum to get to the rest of the level, but the spatula is located early on in this section. If the spatula was given at the end of the section, then the section would be ranked higher, but as it stands, it will be around here. This part of the level is still fun, except for that middle part with the 3 sleep time robots, but dodging the lasers in the first part is one of the more memorable parts of Rock Bottom. I do like the museum part a lot, but since the spatula wasn't given for the whole section, I'll put this one a little outside the top 30. Number 31, Defeat Robots on Guppy Mound. Technically, the spatula isn't completing the slide, but beating the robots after it. But I'll count the whole slide when considering the Sand Mountain spatulas. As the first slide in Sand Mountain, this one is obviously going to be the easiest. It still has its fair share of tricky jumps and turns, but for the most part, it's a standard slide with not much going on. Pressing the button to get the rolling rock to clear the path for you is pretty cool. There isn't that much that stands out from the slide. like the other two in Sand Mountain, but it is the first slide, so that makes sense. It's still fun enough to end up this high on the list though. Number 30, Beat Mrs. Puff's Time. This is pretty much the same thing as the spatula above it. The only difference is that you need to beat the slide in a time limit. You'll likely have plenty of time to spare on this one. This is probably the one slide in Sand Mountain that a beginner can beat on their first try. Number 29, Prawn. Easily the best in-stage boss in the game. It still isn't too hard, but it is a little more challenging than some of the other bosses in the game. Dodging Prawn's beam isn't too difficult, and time in the bubble bowl should be easy enough once you get the hang of it, but the part that threw me off was the onslaught of enemies that Prawn throws at you. It gives you a little more to consider when attacking Prawn, since the build-up for the bubble bowl will leave you open to attacks. It still is a simple boss, but the inclusion of all the enemies makes this fight much more fun. Number 28, End of the Road. This is the first of the few collection spatulas in the game, that being ones where you have to collect all of a certain number of items that can be found throughout the level. Down Bikini Bottom's collectible being a steering wheel. I do like these spatulas because they do require you to go through most of the level in order to get them. Out of the three, the one I think requires a little bit more effort and can cause some frustration for some players are the steering wheels. Unlike the other two, which have collectibles that are on the intended path or are in more contained areas, the steering wheels are spread out throughout the entire downtown Bikini Bottom level, and sometimes in out-of-the-way spots. For the most part, I did like the spatula a lot, but I put it lower on the chance that I can see it potentially being annoying to complete. I usually finish the spatula on my first run through it. I could see myself getting annoyed if I missed one or two in the rooftop section of the level. Depending on what steering wheel you miss, you'll have to travel a decent amount to try and find what you did miss. Plus, there's no indicator of what steering wheels you still need, so looking for them blind might also cause some frustration. Again, I never had an issue with the spatula, and I do like it a lot, but I could see it being annoying for some, especially kids. Number 27, top of the entrance area, Flying Dutchman's Graveyard. The spatula for completing the first area of the Flying Dutchman's Graveyard. The main obstacle here are the pillar tower puzzles where you have to line them up in a way to get Spongebob to wall jump up. It's a pretty cool and unique idea for a challenge that you have to create your own platforms to progress forward. It's the easiest section of the level, and I do wish they used the pillars a little more. Maybe one of the optional side spatulas could have been a harder variation of this puzzle, but what is here is fun. Number 26, Through the Sea Caves. This is the second section of Goo Lagoon, and it falls into the category of really fun, but is a bit too short. Most of this section, you're fighting robots and platforming on short and narrow platforms. You also have to watch out for the water that will sometimes rise up, blocking you from platforming. This is a fun little section of Goo Lagoon. I just wish it was a bit longer. Number 25, Tiki's Go Boom.
Did somebody say boom?
This is one of my favorite bonus spatulas in the game just because of how unique it is. In the distance, there is a cannon shooting appliances at you. It's way too far away for you to destroy, even with the cruise bubble. Also in this area, there are some stone tikis that block buttons you assume will reward you with a soccer spatula. As a kid, I felt a huge sense of accomplishment in figuring out that you have to aim the cannon to shoot in a way that would hit the thunder tikis and free up the buttons for you to press. As an adult, this is a simple spatula that'll take you less than like a minute, but figuring this one out as a kid felt great. If I didn't feel this way about it as a kid, it probably would have ended up lower since it is pretty easy. Since it was fun figuring this one out all those years ago, it's going to end up in my top 25 in the game. Number 24, Karate. Turns out there are two spatulas for the final boss in the game, one for each phase. The first section of the fight is more akin to other fights in the game where you have to dodge the standard 2 or 3 attacks and wait for an opening. I do like this part of the boss better than others in the game because attacking SpongeBob is a little more interesting as you have to hit different lights with your cruise bubble. The attacks you have to dodge are a little more interesting as well than simply jumping over something or having to walk in one direction. It isn't very hard, even as the first phase of the final boss, but I would say it's easily the best regular boss fight in the game. Number 23, Clean Out the Bumper Boats. This is a spatula where I love the section that it's in, but you don't have to do all the fun stuff in the section in order to get the spatula. There's two parts to this one. First, you need to destroy a booth that then opens up the rest of the section to you. Next, you have to go to the bumper boats and destroy all the robots there. The section is fun to go through, even if you don't do all the optional challenges here, but since there isn't much to get in the spatula, I won't put this one up any higher, even though I love this section a lot. Number 22, Return the Museum Art. Out of all the spatulas where you have to find all the collectibles, this is probably the most straightforward and easiest. If you're going through the level, it would be hard to miss any of the paintings. Only like one of them might be missable, maybe, but since the painting is so easy to see, and all of them are in pretty easy to reach locations, it would be difficult not to do this one on your first try if you were going for that. The reason the spatula is higher is because you pretty much need to go through the whole level to get get the spatula, excluding the final slide. Plus, you have to get through the whole museum section to get a painting, so I feel like the spatula makes up for the spatula in the museum being so early on in the section. Number 21, Across the Dreamscape. As much as I do love SpongeBob's dream, I am more referring to the other dreams inside of the level. The outside area is fine, but it's mostly brief and challenging platform sections. Again, I do like that many of these platform sections are more challenging for this game's standards, but they are extremely brief. Plus, you do need to pay some hefty fees in order to progress. At least you do have some of the levels to help you save up for each clam. Getting across SpongeBob's dream for the spatula is fun, but nowhere near the most interesting thing about this level. Number 20, Navigate the Canyons and the Mesas. The final section of Jellyfish Fields. This one is a little shorter than the others, but I still think it has its fair share of fun and memorable moments and areas. It does a good job of ramping up the difficulty a little bit compared to the first section, with there being more enemies and some narrow walkways as the tartar sauce enemies fires at you, but it's the first level, so it still is super easy. There isn't as much that stands out here compared to the first section, but it is still a solid area that I never mind going through when playing this level. Number 19, Swingers Ahoy. What I like about the spatula isn't only the spatula itself, but how you get here. I really do like Sandy's Dream a lot because of all the different paths you can go down. If you're blindly playing this game, you might notice that one of the floating rocks is strangely close to the slide. I was surprised at first to learn that you can actually jump on this platform. Not only that, there is a spatula here as well. Well, more a clam you have to pay for to get a swinging section. This is definitely the most interesting swinging section in the game, with having to avoid swinging into beams, and you'll have to jump down to be able to hook onto certain Texas logos at some parts. The challenge isn't over after that though. You'll have to complete a combat area with the slippery floor, this being the only combat section like this. There's so much going on for this optional spatula that I can't help but put it this high on the list. Number 18, Find All the Lost Campers. This is definitely the best out of having to find a certain number of something missions in the game. It's because none of the campers are too far off the beaten path, but they aren't too easy to find either. I will say, the last 3 campers are pretty easy to get to when playing through the level normally. Plus, this level isn't as open as others, so you'll likely stumble into the last 3 campers, even if you aren't trying to find them. The first 3 though are fun to find. All the challenge in the first section comes from finding these guys. Like I said in my other Battle for Bikini Bottom video, Kelp Forest has a lot of things that do work, but it also has some poor execution in other parts. Finding the campers is definitely one of the good spatulas here. Number 17, Beat Mermaid Man's Time. The time section for the Vine and Kelp Forest, in my opinion, is the hardest spatula in the game. Beating the Vine and Kelp Forest isn't that hard because of the checkpoints throughout it, but doing it all in one go is brutal for this game's standards. Most challenges in the game could be done in under 5 attempts or so, even the harder ones. The ball rolling challenge at Mermaid Man's Time being the only 2 challenges in this game I think are legitimately hard. The constant tight turns, the narrow slide, and not being able to see too far ahead of you makes this easily one of the hardest slides to not fall down on at any point. Plus, I feel like the time you have to beat is not generous at all, because even on attempts where I don't fall, I still don't finish the slide in under the time, so you'll likely have to cheese the slide and do some skips to get the spatula. This is the only time slide that will rank below the regular slide, and it is because the slide is such a difficulty spike in the game, though it still is ranked very high, so I do like the challenge, even if it took me longer to get than I'd like to admit. Number 16, King of the Castle. This is a spatula for the first area of Goo Lagoon, and there's a lot going on here. First, you have to go through all the robots and the platforms to get to the castle itself, which is pretty easy in itself. Glad they didn't give a spatula for this alone. The next part of the spatula is climbing up the castle where the water rises beneath you. There aren't many platforming challenges in this game where there is a sense of urgency. You usually have the ability to take your time when platforming. The rising water is only one part of the section though, as you have to avoid fire-breathing floaties, platforms that break, enemies, and a cannon shooting pufferfishes at you. Usually getting hit by something will result in you falling to your death. There's a lot going on in this small section, and it is a bit tougher than other spatulas, especially at this point in the game. Like, I did have some trouble getting past the top part of the castle with all those cloud robots and the cannons. It is a pretty challenging section, and because of that, I'm ranking it much higher. Number 15, Phase 2 of the Robot Spongebob boss fight. This is more of a level in itself rather than a standard boss fight. There's platforming, enemy hordes, and boss attacks you have to to avoid. It's really got everything here. As the final boss in the game, this is easily the best boss fight in the game because it has so much going on. It isn't just a simple fight of dodging a few attacks and waiting for an opening, but a level that requires you to use your whole arsenal to beat. I especially like the part where you need to aim your cruise bubbles to finish off Robot Spongebob. The only annoying part about this boss is Robot Plankton in the final section. Not necessarily dodging him, but just hitting him with the cruise bubble as he'll move around randomly, and controlling the cruise bubble isn't the most precise. If you miss once, you'll have to dodge his attack patterns again. It won't result in your death, it isn't tough to dodge. This is a minor gripe though compared to everything that is great about this final fight. They really do end this game on a high note. Number 14, Top of the Hill. The very first area of the game you'll be going through. It does everything you would expect from a starting level in the game. Of course, it's going to be simple as it is the first level, but there are many memorable parts to this first section, such as the first bungee hook, the cannon shooting puffer fishes at you, the bouncing tree thingies, and all the extra socks here. They really pack a lot into this small section. As this is one of the few areas that you'll have to go through every time on repeated playthroughs, it's great that it is as fun as it is. Number 13, learn Sandy's moves. Though the spatula is meant for Sandy's tutorial in downtown Bikini Bottom, it might as well be for the whole section, as you'll need to get through all the first section of the level to get this spatula. The first part of the section has some pretty fun rolling SpongeBob parts. The second part is the tutorial for Sandy, who I think is the most fun character in the game with her lasso glide and swinging abilities. What I liked about the spatula is that it is a tutorial, but it is still fun to go through on repeated playthroughs. The tutorials aren't as abundant as in Patrick's tutorial, and even if the section wasn't a tutorial, it would still be fun to go through. Number 12, top of the stack of ships. So I know a lot of people don't love the wall jumping sections in this game, particularly this section. Yeah, it can be somewhat annoying that you will likely fail a few times, but the punishment for failure is so small and you restart so close to where you fall that I don't mind having to try over and over again to beat this section. If you fall, there isn't a long climb back, you're right back where you started. Because of that, this part never gets too frustrating. When you do finally beat the section, you finally feel a sense of accomplishment that you don't really get at many times in this game, because most of this game is pretty easy, and the wall jump is fun to use and makes up most of the challenge of this part. There are some other platforming and battle sections sprinkled here and there as well. Overall, the section does feel super rewarding to beat for the first time. Number 11, defeat robots on Flounder Hill. The second slide in Sand Mountain. One thing you'll notice about many of the slides higher up on the list is that I like that many of them have different ways you can beat them, either that being shortcuts, alternative routes, or skips that you can do to make these slides replayable. This is a slide you'll be visiting a few times in order to not only beat the robots, but to get all the snowman for the socks, and beat Bubble Buddy's time. I do appreciate the alternative paths at different parts of the slide, but besides the first secret route, the forks and the slide are usually brief and merge back together pretty quickly after separating. Though I do appreciate the replayability with the slide, it makes it fun to go down, even on repeated playthroughs. Number 10, beat Bubble Buddy's time. Everything I said about the last one is true here, except you have to beat it on a time limit. I just like this one more because of the extra challenge. Number 9, annoy Squidward. This might come to a surprise to some people that the spatula is so high. It does have a lot of elements of spatulas I don't like, such as it being cryptic and basically being free if you know how to do it, but I can't help but love it. I like this one more than other cryptic spatulas in the game because you're more likely to get it by accident than the others. It's sort of like an Easter egg rather than a challenge. It's a fun extra spatula you get just by jumping around Squidward's house 5 times. It's that simple, but just the idea of the spatula and how you discover it is why I love it so much. Number 8, connect the towers. The spatula might be a little bit of cheating. By itself, it isn't that special. All you need to do is hit the correct one of 2 buttons and shine a light on this one robot. However, it is a spatula that spans the whole level of Goo Lagoon, as the final part of this challenge is only accessible after beating the fair section. So technically this is a spatula you get for beating the whole level, as Goo Lagoon is one of my favorite levels in the game. Of course I'm going to put this spatula high. It's also the only spatula like this where you have to do something in the first section before you'll be able to complete the spatula in another section. Well, I guess it is the same section, but you technically have to go through the whole level to get to this part. So this is pretty much a spatula for beating all of Goo Lagoon, so that's why it's ending up this high in the list. Number 7, Kelp Vine Slide. I mentioned in the Mermaid Man's Time spatula, I do like the slide a lot because of the challenge here. It still is a bit tricky, but getting through it without a time limit shouldn't be as much of an issue for most players. The tight and constant turns, the narrow pathways, and the unpredictability of it all are some of the reasons why I love the slide. Though my favorite thing about the slide is the cheese potential. What I mean is that since you are mostly moving down on the slide, there are many parts where you can jump down and land on a lower platform to skip large parts of the slide. Other slides might have 1 or 2 parts like this, but you can skip large chunks of the slide by jumping down and properly landing land in. It's filled with speedrun potential, and I always have a good time trying to get those skips, even if I fail at it most of the time. Number 6, Across the Rooftops. Though Sandy's tutorial in the first section of downtown Bikini Bottom was well done, I think Across the Rooftops was the perfect use of an introduction area for Sandy, and the best section in the game to utilize her different abilities from the swinging, the lassoing of enemies, and the lasso glide. It feels great to use her here, and the section is well designed to complement Sandy's kit as much as possible. There's also a decent variety of platforming here, with the conveyor belt and platforms that teeter. Plus the small platforms and the enemies make this one of the tougher sections in the early parts of the game. Number 5, Destroy the Robot Ship. The final section of the Flying Dutchman's graveyard. I love this part of the level so much because it makes you feel powerful having to take back the Flying Dutchman's ship. When the music hits while you're mowing down enemies, it's a flow state feeling you don't get at many other points in the game. I also like how it's one of the few sections in the game where you need to use 2 characters together to complete an objective. Most sections are usually specific to one character, and the ones that do require synergy have some flaws, like the Kelp Caves. Here, you have to use both Spongebob's and Sandy's unique abilities to destroy the robot ship. It's a collaboration of characters that I wish was used more often, since it was utilized so well here. Number 4, Defeat Robots on Sand Mountain. The best slide in Sand Mountain. This has everything I love about the Flounder Hill slide, but it adds more. It has alternative paths that require a bit more setup with the rolling ball. There are some pretty big skips you could do on the slide as well, both going down a secret path and in the end. Not only this skip, but there are many other memorable parts to the slide, such as the platforms that fall over and the wind and path at the end. It's always super satisfying hitting those floating tikis at the big jump at the end of the slide. I just love the variety of paths here. Even if they are brief, it means no 2 paths down the slide are the same, and it makes this one of the more fun spatulas, especially on repeated playthroughs. Number 3, Beat Larry's Time. Like all the other Sand Mountain slides, the time challenge ranks above the slide. A fun fact about this one is that it's the longest challenge for a slide in the game at 2 minutes, while the one in Kelp Forest is only 100 seconds long. Just something cool I thought I'd mention. Number 2, music is in the ear of the beholder. Squidward's Dream. This is probably the toughest platforming section in the game, with the small platforms that either move or fall if you stand on them. There are times where you'll have to plan your jumps and time everything pretty precisely so that not only do you land on the platforms, but you'll be on it long enough before it falls so you can reach the next platform after it. Of course, I enjoyed the extra challenge here, but the checkpoints are generous enough to where once you beat a tricky section, you won't have to restart if you fail another part later on. I have no issues with the difficulty, as long as the checkpoints are fair, which they are for this level. That's pretty much why I love this level so much, because it is challenging but fairly so. And for number 1, Slide in Texas Style. Out of all the spatulas in the game, the one for Sandy's Dream is the one I look forward to doing the most on repeated playthroughs. Not only is it the longest slide, but it includes all the things I love about many of the best slides in this game. It has different wind and paths that you can either stay on for safety or jump across for skips. It's pretty challenging as well, especially towards the end where the slide gets extremely thin. I also love just how bizarre everything is here. The developers really went off the wall with how they designed this level. From the cows throwing pies at you, the giant cow skull you have to jump through, and all the manure everywhere. They even have the Alamo. I think Texans like that. Again, this pretty much does everything I already mentioned about what I love about the slides in this game, but even better. It has some challenge, but not to the point to where it gets too frustrating. Plus, you can add your own challenge to it by jumping across the different paths, especially in the beginning. Not only does this have what I like about slide sections, but what I love about all the best golden spatulas in this game. That's why it's ended up as number 1 on this list. Anyways, that's it for my ranking of all the golden spatulas in Battle for Bikini Bottom. This list definitely took me a long time to make, but I had fun going back through the game again and 100%ing it for the first time. It's something I would be up for doing with other video games as well. If you agreed or disagreed with any of my placements, then feel free to leave a comment on your thoughts. If you stayed up to this point in the video, I greatly appreciate it. That's it for this video. See you all next time.